Let's look at using the Procedural Texture filter in Affinity Photo to tone map a high dynamic range image to standard dynamic range. Now, traditionally, to achieve this kind of tone mapping, we would use the tone mapping persona located up here, but I'm going to show you a different approach using the Procedural Texture filter. So I will add the non-destructive version of this filter by going to Layer, New Live Filter Layer, Colors, and Procedural Texture. I'll just drag the dialog over here and expand it slightly so we can see more of our image. So the Procedural Texture filter allows you to programmatically write your own filters, and to that end it's incredibly powerful. To get started, what we'll do is click the plus icon here 3 times to add equation fields for the red, green and blue color channels. Don't worry about the alpha channel. Now, because we've got 0 to start with in each of these channels, our document is now pure black. So to get our initial image back, in the red equation field we can type capital R, in the green equation field capital G, and in the blue equation field capital B. Okay, so now we need to scale these pixel values down so we can start to see our out-of-bound high dynamic range values here. A simple way of achieving this is just to divide the color channel by a given value, so R divided by 5, G divided by 5, and B divided by 5, for example. But at this point, let's create some custom inputs to give ourselves some better control over these values. So what I'll do is create a 0 to 1 range input. For the variable name, I'll use TM for tone map, and in the description I'll just put a friendly name of tone map. I'll also create an integer number input. For the variable name I'll use TMS, and this is going to stand for tone map scale. Let's set an initial value of 15. So we can now reference these 2 variables we've just created in our equation functions up here. So rather than divide by 5, instead I could type open bracket tm multiplied by tms close bracket. The reason I've put this multiplication of the 2 variables inside closed brackets is so that the result is pre-calculated before it is divided by the color channel. We'll do the same for the other 2 channels. So open bracket tm multiplied by tms close bracket. Okay, so now we can use these 2 custom inputs. I can use the tone map slider to control the overall amount of tone mapping, and tone map scale, as I increase it, it will allow me to reveal brighter pixel values, so we can see detail in the sun here, at the expense of darkening the overall image. So the next step then is to mitigate this darkening of the image. And to do this, what we want to do is use another function on the result of this division. So in order to achieve this, we now need to make a variable out of this division result. So at the start here, I'm going to type var divided equals, and then of course we have our division function here, and then I'm going to add a semicolon, and this is just denoting that we're going to carry on with another function. And we'll do the same here, so var divided equals, then a semicolon, and then var divided equals, and a semicolon. So now we're going to use a square root function on the divided variable. So sqrt open brackets divided close brackets. And do the same for the other 2 channels. Okay, so now we have a much flatter looking result. But let's say we wanted to bring back some contrast. What we now need to do is mix between the divided variable and the result of the square root. So we're going to turn the result of the square root function into another variable. This time we'll type var flat equals, and then do another semicolon at the end. var flat equals, and a semicolon, and once again with the blue channel. And I'll just expand this dialog a bit more as well. So now we need a simple function to mix between these two variables. That's going to be linear interpolation, and the function for this is lerp, and then open bracket, and we'll put the flat variable first, then comma, and the divided variable. And then our third parameter is going to be a value between 0 and 1, and that's going to determine the mix between these two results. So for a halfway mix, we'll use 0.5 for now. And I'll just do the same again for the green and blue channels. Okay. But now let's create another 0 to 1 range input, and we're going to use it in place of the 0.5 value here. So we'll call the variable name C, and for the description we'll put contrast, and instead of 0.5 we'll just swap this out and reference the C contrast variable instead. Okay, so we can now use this slider to control the mix between the flat result and the initial divided result, which has more contrast. Okay, so finally, we're going to add the ability to control the overall brightness. So for this, I'm going to add two more custom inputs. I'll add a 0 to 1 range input, and for the variable name here, I'll use BR, and for description, I'll use brightness, and then I'll add an integer number input. For the variable name, I'll use BRS, and for description, this is going to be our brightness scale. We'll put the initial value for this at 2. And so now we just need to append to the linear interpolate function. So we're going to use multiplied by open brackets BR multiplied by BRS, and just repeat that for the other two channels. Like so. And now we have the ability to use the brightness slider here to control the overall brightness, and also bring up the brightness scale, like so. So we can now use this in conjunction with our other inputs here. So for tone map scale, for example, I might actually increase this to 100 for this particular image. And let's just bring brightness scale down slightly, and perhaps also experiment with the contrast slider. Okay, so now let's save this as a preset that we can reuse with other images. I'll click the little icon here and go to Manage Presets, because we're going to create a brand new category. So in the Preset Manager, I'll just choose Create Category here, and let's just call this HDR Tools. Click Create, and that's created a new category at the bottom here. We can just close this Preset Manager for now. And then again, clicking this little icon here, I can choose Create Preset. In the category, I can choose HDR Tools, and let's just call this Tone Map HDR to SDR, and create a new preset. Great, so now we can reuse this preset in some other images. For example, I'll switch over to this document here, and this is a 3D render that's been composited in 32-bit HDR. So let's once again go to Layer, New Life Filter Layer, Colors, and Procedural Texture. Okay, and I'll drag the dialog over here like I did before. And then under the preset drop-down here, we can choose our new Tone Map HDR to SDR preset. Just expand the dialog and experiment with our custom inputs here to find a result that works well for this particular image or document. And don't forget that we can also do additional tonal work on top of the live procedural texture layer. So if I go to the layers panel here, you can see I have my procedural texture filter layer. I could, for example, just add a simple brightness and contrast adjustment layer to further tweak the tone mapped SDR tones that we've just created. And there we go. That was a fairly in-depth look at using the procedural texture filter to create our own tone mapper for HDR to SDR imagery. Thank you for watching.